And wait for it to start. Oh, I think, here we go. This is going to be recorded, and also there is the URL for the attendance in the chat pod, or you can also click the or scan the QR code as well to mark your attendance. So I am your host, Megan Morrow. I'm the Associate Director of Career Services, and I have Mark Horswood, who is the founder of Isaac Paul & Associates, as my guest. And today we will be discussing the importance of accepting consequences and embracing mistakes. Mark has a varied work and academic background. He has a unique opportunity to blend the experience of working on the floor as an electrician in a heavy manufacturing environment, coupled with a master's degree in human resource development and in applied behavioral science from the Leadership Institute of Seattle, which gives him a perspective few consultants possess. He has worked with CEOs, union presidents, plant managers, and frontline workers. Mark has extensive experience working with populations from diverse professional, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Prior to opening his own business, Isaac Paul & Associates, he worked for 8 years as an internal consultant with Alcoa, bridging the gap between leaders and workers. In addition to Mark's consulting experience in the US, he has extensive international training experience working in Australia, Canada, Jamaica, and the West Indies. Mark is mostly retired, we say mostly with a heavy emphasis on that, and lives in the Arts District of Evansville, Indiana, near his daughters and grandchildren. So good morning, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, good morning, Megan. I'm really happy to be here, and I really like your series.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about it covers the intangible things that corporations are looking for in their workers, and especially their leaders. So, when you were reading that bio, I thought, well, I probably was the most unlikely consultant, in my early life. I never expected to do it. I've worked, well, your father and I worked in the smelter at Alcoa, and really hot and hard molten metal, work. And so both of us kind of start hitting the books, thinking we got to get out of there. And your dad was a lot quicker on it than I was, but I remember what changed things. I went back to the tech school, after 10 years of being out of high school and working as a laborer on the railroad in the pot room. And, I thought, well, I'm going to, just get out of this. So anyway, I signed up for electrical apprenticeship, and I started going to school, to tech school. And I thought, wow, this is kind of rewarding. So I went on and, got a bachelor's, and then, I went on and got a master's in human resource and development, because I thought, I'd like to do training.
Yeah.
And, I got invited to go to this company leadership training program. And I was with the first group of steel workers that went through it. And it was a week-long training, 8 hours a day. And I remember the first day I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. I was sitting in the back. And then the second day I kind of moved up towards the middle. I thought, well, this really have an impact on me. I tell you, Megan, on the third day, I was right up front in the front row. And I was sitting there, and that guy was talking about, human systems and communication and conflict resolution and those kind of things. And I just remember thinking, I don't care what it takes or what kind of degree you have to have. That's what I'm going to do. And, I just believe there's a lot of power in having a dream, because I just said, I'm going to do that. And it was really weird, because like 2 or 3 weeks later, the union president and the plant manager came to me and said, hey, we're tired of paying these high-priced consultants, so we're going to develop a cadre of our own. Would you be interested?
Oh, wow.
I'm like, oh, yeah. And so, that was the start. I went to Leadership Institute of Seattle for 2 years, and, learned about, human systems and communication and feedback, and it just kind of took off from there.
That's really cool. I love how you tell your story about how, you didn't exactly know what you were doing or what you wanted to do. And yeah, I can still remember the stories my father told me about working in the pot room of Alcoa, how it was a good day when his clothes didn't catch on fire. Yeah,
That's so true.
that's
It's
so
so
true.
true.
And
And a
then to
rare
see,
day.
and then just to see the development, I think a lot of our students value that, understanding that, sometimes you have a dream or you have a goal, but you don't maybe exactly know how to get there, or maybe you want to do something, but don't exactly know what it is. And so so talk to us a little bit about, you told us a little bit about the beginning part, and you got into like the training and development because you were invited by your organization, and then kind of what has gone from there. I mean, clearly this wasn't what you thought you were going to do when you first graduated high school. So
It wasn't. And I think back to just, having a dream. I think you really got to have some kind of vision of what you'd like to do and who you'd like to be working with and what kind of work. And it has so much power because when I first started out, they just said, hey, you could teach some leadership training in your plant, your particular plant. And yeah, I thought, yeah, that'd be something to like, earn a living like that. And then I thought, it'd be nice to travel. And then it'd be nice to travel. Well, each time I, have a new dream like that, it come true, like in 4 or 5 months, next thing I was traveling around to different plants and then Australia and Jamaica. And so I keep telling, my girls, I said, just make sure you dream big enough, because they come to you. They
yeah,
come to and you got to put in the work, like
yes.
you guys are doing. You got to have your credentials and bona fides, but I think there's just such power in that. And I went from working on the railroad as a laborer, and then in the pot room, and then I became an electrician. None of these were on my career path that I knew of.
Hmm.
They just kind of came about, and I
That's
don't know,
awesome.
it's really been rewarding.
Yeah, that's excellent. I mean, I'm right there with you. I changed my major 3 times in my undergrad and 3 times in grad school, and wasn't sure I was going to do. My mom tells me I wanted to be a bear trainer or a taxi cab driver.
Well, what she tells me, because I tell that story all the time. I remember I'm the one that asked you that. You said a bear trainer or a taxi driver, and I think your dad said, well, last time you looked, there wasn't that many bear trainers.
Oh, that's too funny. Well, I mean, so here I am now doing what I love. But let's talk about our topic today, Mark. So what talk to me, I mean, not just as an employer and employee, but I mean, just in general life, I mean, about accepting consequences and being able to just like embrace mistakes. Like, what does that look like, especially in the workforce, to be able to accept consequences? We had Steve Horswood on here a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about, being proactive and taking the initiative and saying, hey, I made a mistake, and not just like trying to sweep it under the rug, but then what next? What happens next?
Well, there couldn't be a better time, you know, to uh, to admit mistakes and what you learn from them, because it's such a big thing these days. Uh, and that's why I really liked your series, and I thought, man, these are the kind of intangible things that are so important, but it's like it doesn't necessarily get covered in school. The big thing for employers these days, and especially if your students, not only want to get hired, but want to move up in the organization. There's such a call for, it sounds strange enough, but admitting mistakes and learning from them.
Mhm.
Uh, the big things these days are they're looking, where they used to just uh, look for the candidate with the biggest brain, who's the smartest, got the most IQ. And then, it became emotional intelligence was very important, like being aware of your emotions, being able to manage them, being able to manage other people. Well, then, a new one comes along. It's called intellectual humility.
Okay.
And part of that is they're saying, yeah, hey, it's good when you're in corporate world to be self-assured, confident, firm, decisive. But they say, hey, you know what? It also, they're finding it really well if you have a leader that, can see things from another perspective, be open to saying, I don't have all the answers. But at the top of that list is being able to admit mistakes, because they're saying, hey, these days you learn. They're saying that it's the only way you learn.
Mhm.
I was reading this article about Jeff Bezos,
Mhm.
arguably one of the premier entrepreneurs in the world. And he was talking to his group, his people. It was on New Year's Eve, and he was talking about the next year. And he said, mistakes and innovation are inseparable twins.
Oh.
The only way that you can grow, be creative, and be innovative is you have to take risks. And it was so crazy because he told his group, he said, so I want you to go out there and make mistakes. And he said, and not the same mistake over and over again. He said, that'd be madness.
Yeah.
But he said, he wants you, and he said this, he said, I want us to make new mistakes and I want to make big ones. So he said, get out there and make bigger mistakes, because small mistakes aren't going to move the needle enough.
Mhm.
And, there's other companies that, when the big boys are doing it, people take notice. And so like Amazon, Coca-Cola, Domino's, Netflix, I mean, they want leaders that could uh, lead a culture like this, instill a culture where, hey, it's not only okay, we want you to make mistakes. We want you to learn from them. We want you to take risks. That's the only way to grow.
Right.
So, these guys are calling for them. And I read this article in Harvard Business Review, and they were saying that, a lot of these companies are espousing, yeah, we want to be innovative and we want to be creative and, next generation. But the review said they are so afraid of making mistakes, which is the very reason they don't have innovation
Yes.
and creativity. So it's kind of a leap of faith, but there's just so much out there, that says, hey, if you're not, yeah, I think it's Einstein got credited for saying it. He said basically, hey, if you're not making mistakes, probably not doing
You're
anything.
not doing anything. Yeah. Yeah, that I've heard that message several times from a variety of my guests that have been on here. If you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. But like you said, don't make the same mistakes.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's
I'm sorry.
no, that's going to be frowned on, making the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. I even tell that to my own children, like you're learning, you're growing, and you're supposed to
Oh
make mistakes,
yeah.
but just don't make the same mistakes, because then those apologies don't mean anything, you know.
Mm.
But let's talk about like being able to accept consequences. I have seen this in my personal life. I was a high school teacher for a long time, so I saw this a lot. Of course, I have children of my own. Just being able to not pass the buck, but being able to just accept it. Yes, I made a mistake. Like, how can you tell me about a time that maybe like where you or somebody that you were supervising or working with that was unable to accept consequences, and kind of how that transpired, or maybe when they did, if that was
Actually,
anything?
one powerful experience I had actually had to do with somebody admitting a mistake. And it was when I was at Alcoa in the Steelworkers, and
Mhm.
we were, at the moment negotiating for a contract, which was always a contentious time. Uh, and I just remember the big shot came in, name. I told him that I use his name in this story every once in a while, so he's cool with it. This big shot named Royce Halls, he was over all the smelters in North America and Canada. He's a big shot. So anyway, he came to talk to us in a kind of a town hall meeting. And, I happened to be up front There was 400 some employees in there. And he was just talking about the, the market, the economy, cost and safety and, the industry. And at the end, he had question and answer period. And so, he said, okay, I'm going to open up for questions. Well, this guy, he wasn't too far from me up front. He goes, hey, we had to get fire retardant clothing pretty soon. And we already work in an environment that's like 150 degrees and, gassy and, just a lot of heat. And you guys picked the heaviest fire retardant clothing. There's all kind of models, and you picked the heaviest one made out of wool, to wear in that kind of heat. And he just said, he goes, why'd you do that? Well, Royce Halls, he was up there, he thought for a second, and he said, we just made a mistake on that.
Wow.
And he said, actually, I'm responsible. I made a mistake on that.
Wow, that's powerful.
It was so powerful, and I told him, I said, I was right there beside the guy and I go, hey, Royce, it's been a long time since I've heard somebody at your level admit to a mistake like that. And, it was a real moment because, it got really quiet. He goes, I really am afraid to, and I'm reluctant to, because people look for me to show them leadership and I hope, trust I'm finding the right way. And to admit I made a mistake, I think they're going to lose trust in me. And I just remember the way I felt, and I told him, I said, I trust you more now
Yes.
than I did 5 minutes ago.
Yes.
It was just a powerful movement. It just really drove home to me. It's not going to set you back. You look at you look more on you like you have integrity,
Mm-hmm.
and it protects your credibility. I just see over and over that people aren't perfect, and people know you're not perfect, and basically they, for the most part, give you a pass. If you admit what you did and accept the consequences.
And just own it. I know.
Yeah.
I tell my students all the time, you'll get so much more respect from people, and my own children too. You'll get so much more respect from people if you just own it instead of saying, oh, it's not my fault, or, oh, I didn't know. And I can think now, I have my own example where I had just graduated high school. My family and I had moved to Georgia. I didn't know the area. And so I was still under my parents' car insurance, still driving their car. And I ended up speeding through a school zone. I didn't know because there was a school bus. And I honestly, truly, it was a true accident, but I got pulled over. I got a very hefty fine. I had to go to court. And so I came home and I was just devastated. And I just threw the keys down on my father's desk. And I said, just take the car from me, Dad. I can't be trusted. And I told him what happened. And my father is very strict, very, very strict. And he just picked those keys up, put them back in my hand. He said, kid, you made a mistake. And he's like, so what's the next steps? Let's just get through this. I was crying. I just thought for sure that he was going to disown me. I was going to be out of the will. He was going to take the car from me. He was going to yell at me. And he just like, no, I came right in, and it was hard because I know my father, I know like how strict he can be and his expectations of me. And I felt short of those. So, but he had so much respect for me just for simply saying, hey, I screwed up, man. I didn't mean to, I didn't do it on purpose, but it's still my responsibility. And we worked through it. And that was huge for me. And I try to tell it to my students, like you're going to make mistakes. I tell my own children, don't try to sweep it under the rug. Don't try to pretend like it didn't happen. Even when my kids were little, like if you spilled grape juice on my white carpet, come tell me now. Don't try to hide it. So then we can't fix it. It becomes a bigger problem.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to just humbly say, I screwed up. I'm sorry. What's the next steps? I think that's huge.
Yeah, that is big. I know it's the way we were raised up in our house too. I know my dad, he was really strict, and I'll tell you what, you got 90% through it, just one, by telling the truth and accepting the consequences. And, I mean, I think he so valued that, he had for respect for you, if you
Yeah.
could do that.
Yeah, that was huge. And, being able to do that in the workplace too. I mean, it's humbling, especially for these new students who are graduating. I mean, they're still so young, they're still so green, they're getting out into the world, and some of them have like a perfection complex. Like, I need to be perfect. I don't want to make mistakes. And sometimes people think like a mistake might be the end of the world, but especially being new, especially being green, being able to come to a supervisor and say, hey, before this gets any bigger or before this goes any further, like I screwed up. And what can we do? Even Horswood's message was the same thing. Like, hey, if you come to me and tell me, like, let's work through it versus me having to find out about it. And then now I have to
Mhm.
come and address it with you. It's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah. Uh, I think that's one of the big thing that employers, corporate, are looking for is, I mean, not just admitting the mistakes, but I mean, there's such a gem of opportunity to learn from it. I mean, they say that actually things that fail, you look more deeply into than things that succeed.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there was a company I worked for, behavioral science technology for a while. What they used to do at the very beginning when they were going to launch a project, they do what they call this forensic investigation. And they said, okay, we'll say this project failed and want to come up with reasons why it failed. And so, they kind of get proactive about, how they're going to launch it. But it's just all from, I mean, Henry Ford, he said, hey, the only mistake is the one that you learn nothing from.
I like that.
Yeah. I mean,
I like
there's
that.
always an opportunity there. And I think employers, that's probably the biggest thing they're looking for. Not only that you admit it, but that you find the lesson in it and see how to correct it. And
And
because,
grow.
yeah, and grow. Because, I mean, they find, workers that do that, employees that do that, uh, much better at problem solving, critical thinking, and there's a heavy price to pay if you don't. I worked in the nuclear industry for a while. I worked for them. I mean, they got called in by the, national agency because they were having some real safety violations. But
Mhm.
when they came to, when we got looking at it, my partner and I, uh, we found they made mistakes so costly to the employee. I mean, they public, ridicule, demeaning, browbeating, employees that made mistakes. And all it did was drive the mistakes underground. People quit reporting them. And, in the nuclear industry, I mean, the odds are just way too high.
Yeah.
People started hiding problems, didn't want to admit, it was so prevalent there. I mean, we kind of got a kick out of it in a way. I mean, how they just looked at it. They called it the wounded wildebeest syndrome.
Okay.
When like the wildebeest gets injured out on the plane and all the lions are attacking them and the other wildebeest are just looking saying, I'm glad it's not me. But
That's
yeah,
funny.
it's costly when you don't.
Yeah. I had another guest on here. She's the CFO of her company, and she was sharing a story with us about how an employee of hers, didn't verify something, and she misallocated around almost $1 million of
Yeah.
company funds. And so they had to let her go. And instead of just saying, oh my gosh, can I fix it? What can we do? It's not my fault. I didn't know, and then, now they're going to court and they're battling in court, all because of her gross negligence. But she's also lost a friend in all this. She lost her job, she lost a friend, and she's spending thousands of dollars of court fees and costs and time in court trying to fight this, what she's considering wrongful termination,
Mm.
versus had she had just owned it and been like, oh my, I did a huge mistake. What can we do? How can I help? She kind of
Mm.
washed her hands and said, it's not my fault. And
Mm.
therefore, like I said, now she's got all these extra consequences that she wouldn't have had she had just been like, oh man, I screwed up. but I don't know if they could have kept her on. $1 million is a lot of money. But
Yeah,
might have
yeah,
salvaged her friendship.
yeah. That's a tough moment, deciding, am I gonna, report this or, have fear for the consequences? It takes guts. It takes guts. It takes humility uh, to admit mistakes. I mean, I see it more as, courageous rather than a weakness.
I do too. I do too. Because yeah, I consider that very cowardly to just hide and say, not my fault. I didn't know. I mean, maybe you didn't know, but you're still responsible.
Yeah. When you look at it just at a personal level,
Mhm.
just like one person to another, and somebody doesn't admit their mistakes, it's, I don't know, it's hard to have much respect for.
Yeah, or trust.
But yeah, exactly. But then, even if one is a mistake is costly, uh, I don't think it's just me. I mean, I think it's a lot of people. It's like, man, you got to respect, uh, the risk and the courage it took to bring it up.
Yeah.
And, the ability to face the music because, that goes part and parcel with it. There's an old saying, or I think it's like popular psychology these days. They say, hey, when you choose the behavior, you choose the consequences.
Absolutely. I love that you say that because that's even how I raise my children. Like, okay, here's the behavior that I don't want you to do. And here's the consequence if you choose to do the behavior. So if you choose the behavior, you're choosing the consequence. So you don't get to get mad at me. You get when you lose your Xbox or you lose your phone or you get grounded or something like that, don't be mad at me. You chose it. You want
Yeah,
to.
that's so great.
Yeah. And then
That's
they'll
so
go,
good.
oh, okay, but hey, I took all the emotion out of it, and now they have to be responsible and they have to say, okay, you know what? You're right. I did this thing I wasn't supposed to, and here's the consequence. They might not like it. They might be internally hating me, but they're not
Yeah,
outwardly
yeah.
expressing that because I mean, what can you do? It was very clear. There was no gray area. So
Yeah, well, those lessons, they, even the way they look like they're upset and frustrated by it at the moment. Lessons like that last such a long time.
yes.
I was just thinking while you were talking, I thought, well, my daughter Lexi,
Mhm.
I remember when she was like 12 or 13 and, she did something, I can't remember what it was, but anyway, I said, you do that again, and you'll be grounded for a week. And she said, you would ground me just for that? And I go, nope, you're going to ground yourself because,
Oh, okay.
you're the one that's got control over it, not me.
Exactly. Well, Mark, we're kind of coming to the end of our talk here. Is there any last bit of wisdom or advice you could give to students who are looking to develop these skills about being able to accept consequences and embracing mistakes?
You know, what I'd say, Megan, is just when you get hired, when you get with a new employee, I mean, come right out of the gate being known for that. I mean, that builds trust. It's the kind of skills they're looking for already. And I mean, once you can build trust like that right from the very beginning, it's so much easier than having to repair and, go back and, try and resolve things that you didn't in the first place. I mean, just be known for that. I mean, your work ethic and your honesty and trust level are just going to be things that follow you around your whole life. And if you have a strong work ethic and, honest and trustworthy, uh, I mean, people will hire people like that above, the biggest brain in the class. I mean, that's the kind of qualities they're looking for.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, they're not looking for anything perfect. They're looking for someone who is invested in their company and that is willing to, like you said, just grow with it. And I think that's awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and sharing your thoughts with my students. I know that they appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, yeah, it
And
was a pleasure. It was a pleasure for me too. Hey, and I just want to encourage you. I mean, I love this series that you've got there. I mean, it's the kind of things that just don't always get covered, but are so, so important.
Yeah, I think
Keep
so.
it up.
I've been grateful to have the opportunity to just kind of take this idea and run with it. And it's wonderful. And I'm loving it. And I'm hoping that, my students are getting as much out of it as we hope they are.
Hey, it comes across that you love it when you talk about it.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you again for being here, Mark. And thank you everybody for joining us. Remember, if you need to mark your attendance, please either scan the QR code on the screen or click the URL that I put in the chat pod. I'll even put it again one more time. But thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Mark. Everybody have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Okay, Maiden. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.